Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to a post on how to destroy talent. I recently read a story about how the fastest girl in America was broken down by a training regimen designed by complete idiots. And it struck a chord with me because it reminded me a bit of my university experience. When I was in the university, there was a daily race to complete problem sets, and those who worked together had a much easier time finishing those problem sets. Intellectually, the experience was a lot like drinking from a fire hose and then being told to pee out the shape of the alphabet, as in most of the material seemed to just wash right through you. That was an absolutely terrible metaphor, and I apologize for it, but I'm sure you get my point. Despite its shortcomings, I do not feel like my university experience was wasted, of course. Rather, I feel that the important lessons took a very long time to sink in. The more associative lessons literally took decades to take their final shape. And it was only when I began to try to recover and reconstruct all of the stories I'd heard in classrooms over the years that I discovered that I really did understand the material, and that many of my fellow students had only developed the illusion of understanding before they were taken away to their academic or corporate treadmills. By seeing how people answered physics questions on the internet, I discovered that it was as though many people had learned the rules of the game of chess while lacking any concept of what the chessboard looked like. I'm sure that I'm not the only person who caught a glimpse of the chessboard. I just wonder where all of the people who caught that glimpse went. Because once you understand the basic shape and meaning of things, you will have very little patience for studying the field any further. You will feel frustrated with those who continue to gaze through their microscopes with a sense of mystification and wonder. It is, of course, perfectly natural to be mystified for any length of time, because life doesn't typically give you the time to do the sort of thinking required to piece everything you've learned together. You need time to do a bit of independent thinking at your own pace, and that thinking is not typically done consciously. It is done in the background as your mind develops a model of the world at different length scales. When your mind has completed these models, it will present them to your conscious self in some way, so that you can compare and contrast them. At least this is what thinking feels like for me. The next step is, of course, to find a community with which you can discuss your understanding. But this community often never takes shape, because each individual arrives at their understanding independently. Their description tends to be created in a private language that is incomprehensible to everyone else. And when 1,000 people start speaking 1,000 different languages, as is often the case within the physics community, it is no small wonder that the community as a whole decides that all of the inconsistencies are mysterious and in need of more funding and in need of more study, when what they really need are some adept translators and politicians who can corral all of the languages into one coherent, consistent form, so that everyone feels like they're on the same page. Since this is not happening at the graduate level, it may happen within subdisciplines, But once you start looking at all of the different disciplines of physics, you see that they're all speaking different languages. And it's possible, I'm telling you, that you can understand how all of those different languages are the same. But it's frustrating to get to that point. And I think there's a shortcut by spending some time thinking about how mirrors work and understanding things like chain fountains. And there's a list of links in the blog post below of debunked YouTube physics content where there's just terrible physics educational material on the internet today. It will lead you in ridiculous directions where people are making literal interpretations of things that should be understood figuratively. So I have some nice videos in the link below also about areas where we need to avoid unnecessary complexity and the value of learning about the Mandelbrot set. It's just something worth thinking about independently. Thinking independently is so much more fun than trying to drink from a fire hose in an accelerated, competitive classroom environment that is, in some way, it's a talent killer. It is designed to destroy people's talent and motivation. When you start thinking independently, all sorts of strange questions begin to occur to you. And it's not just in the world of physics, it's in everything. For example, why is it so hard to find a decent online recipe for that fluffy white stuff that is used in US grocery store cakes and inside of Twinkies and Ho-Hos? The fluffy white stuff in commercial cakes is not the same thing as the yucky powdered sugar and butter stuff that all of the online recipes suggest. And if you search for recipes for fluffy white icing, you will find absolutely horrible recommendations involving marshmallow fluff, Cool Whip, or awful icings that involve egg whites or inappropriate amounts of cream cheese. I have honestly tried many of these recipes, and they are absolutely terrible imitations of the goal product, which is commercial grade fluffy white frosting. When confronted with the mystery of the recipe for commercial grade fluffy stuff, my inner conspiracy theorist demands to know who is protecting the secrets of how to make fluffy white icing. This ingredients list on the side of store-bought cakes implies that complex chemistry is involved. Unless these conspiracy theoretic conditions occur organically within corporate incentive structures, which have, in some sense, a mind of their own, I have discovered that there is a powerful distributed idea suppression complex that does not want us to know how to make fluffy white frosting. Because if people found out how easy it is, they would stop purchasing pre-made cakes and the entire cake economy would collapse. Since the coronavirus has already collapsed the economy, I feel okay about revealing to you the secret of the fluffy white stuff used on US grocery store cakes and inside of Twinkies and Ho-Hos. It is an astoundingly simple combination of sweetened condensed milk whipped with some sort of fat like butter or margarine or lard, yet vegetable shortening. Yet you would never be able to figure this out from the complex ingredients list on the side of a store-bought cake. That's it. Sweetened condensed milk whipped with butter. Nothing more is required. It's amazing. And if you whip those two ingredients together for long enough, you will get the mysterious, fluffy white frosting that goes in prepackaged and grocery store manufactured cakes everywhere. Strangely enough, this secret recipe is referred to on the internet as Russian buttercream. My goodness, the Ruskies have claimed the frosting secrets that our capitalist overlords have been keeping from us for decades. This great icing conspiracy ties back into the theme of this post, which is how to destroy talent. Because when you feel inept at making something as simple as fluffy white frosting, and when this feeling of inept helplessness is cultivated by capitalists who want to protect their monopolistic icing secrets, you learn about a powerful technique to destroy the impulse to innovate on an individual level. If you discourage youngsters at an early cake baking experimental phase in their development, you can train them to fall back on corporate products whenever their internet research fails to deliver the secrets of commercial-grade fluffy white icing. I don't think that this subversion of individual innovation is exclusively the domain of US or multinational corporations. It also seems to be funded by foreign governments with political aims who mass produce misleading clickbait educational videos for YouTube. There is a wonderful series called How to Cook That, in which a woman debunks a bunch of bad YouTube videos on all sorts of things. And I recommend that. There's a link to it in the blog post below. In any case, if commercial grade fluffy white icing recipes are being hidden from us, what else is sitting in our collective blind spots? So I'll conclude this with a word to the wise, a little baking tip. The chocolate chip cookie recipe on the back of the package of Toll House chocolate chips tends to produce rather flat, non-professional results. And if you want to fix the recipe so that it makes commercial grade, chewy chocolate chip cookies, like the ones from pre-made dough tubes or frozen Mrs. Fields dough pucks, all you need to do is use 2 eggs instead of 3 and use 2/3 of the butter. You can even melt the butter to make the stirring a lot easier, unlike the unmelted butter called for in the original recipe. I mean, I remember being a kid and struggling with almost melted butter and trying to stir it with all of my strength, and it was so hard. It doesn't need to be that hard. So I hope you enjoyed the wide-ranging themes of this post. I like to meander a bit because I like to try to connect things that don't seem like they're connected. And some people might hate that, but that's how I like to think. It's sort of associative reasoning stretches, pulling everything together. Because once you've done that, then you can start doing more linear reasoning to connect them more logically and precisely and understand the ways in which different languages overlap and do not overlap. So, thank you for watching. Until next time. I'll do more science posts in the future. I have about 2 or 3 of those coming up.